When Gilligan's Island first set sail on television screens in the 1960s, hardly anyone could have predicted the waves it would make in pop culture. What was supposed to be a lighthearted sitcom about 7 stranded strangers quickly became something more. The characters weren't just passengers on a 3-hour tour gone wrong. They became part of people's living rooms, part of family routines, and part of America's cultural memory. Generations of fans have laughed at Gilligan's bumbling mistakes, found comfort in the skipper's protective nature, and admired the quirks of each castaway who brought something unique to that deserted island. The show may have lasted only 3 short seasons, but its spirit outlived its airtime, finding immortality in reruns, syndication, and the countless references that continue to pop up in TV and film. It was never just about a desert island. It was about people, flawed, funny, larger-than-life people, thrown together and forced to depend on one another in ways that audiences never stopped loving. But as the decades passed, the laughter that once filled American homes began to quiet. One after another, the stars who gave life to those characters faded away. And now, only one remains. It might seem like being the last surviving member of such an iconic ensemble would be a gift, something to take pride in. But her journey tells a different story. It's a story marked by loneliness, heartbreak, and struggles that ran far deeper than the glitz and glamour of Hollywood ever showed. So who is this last castaway of Gilligan's Island? And what path led her here, standing as the final survivor of one of television's most beloved shows? To answer that, we have to start where it all began, with the creation of the island itself. The idea for Gilligan's Island didn't come from a studio brainstorming session or a network executive's carefully calculated pitch. Instead, it came from something as simple as a classroom discussion. Sherwood Schwartz, the show's creator, once sat in on a college class where the professor asked his students a question. If you were stranded on a deserted island and could only bring one thing with you, what would it be? To most people, it was a thought experiment, a way to spark conversation. But to Schwartz, it was something more. That question lingered in his mind, sparking an idea that would eventually grow into one of the most iconic sitcoms of the 1960s. He saw it as an opportunity to throw a group of very different people into one unlikely situation and watch the comedy and humanity unfold. And that's exactly what he did. The show was built on contrast. A clueless first mate, a no-nonsense skipper, a glamorous movie star, a humble farm girl, a genius professor, and a pair of wealthy socialites completely unequipped for survival. Together, they became the ultimate odd couple ensemble, each personality bouncing off the others in ways that kept audiences entertained week after week. It was a simple premise, but that was its genius. Schwartz knew that when you strip people down to survival, their differences become both their greatest obstacles and their greatest strengths. Gilligan's Island premiered in 1964 and ran for 3 seasons, ending in 1966. In total, only 98 episodes were ever produced, but that was more than enough to secure its place in history. The catchy theme song, "Just Sit Right Back and You'll Hear a Tale," is still recognized instantly, decades later. Kids hummed it on playgrounds, families sang it together in living rooms, and even today, it lingers in the minds of viewers who grew up with the show. But behind the sunny palm trees and lighthearted hijinks, the reality of the cast members' lives often looked very different. Off-screen, their stories were filled with personal challenges, tragedies, and difficult journeys that few fans ever saw. And so, as we look back at the castaways we loved so much, we'll also uncover the truth of what became of them. From Bob Denver's struggles with fame, to Alan Hale Jr.'s battle with illness, to Jim Backus and Natalie Schaefer's bittersweet exits, each castaway's story has a chapter that ends in heartbreak. And finally, we'll reach the last surviving star, Tina Louise, whose life story reveals that being remembered as Ginger Grant came at a price far greater than anyone might imagine. Bob Denver, the man who brought Gilligan to life, didn't. stumble into stardom by accident. Before he ever donned that iconic red shirt and bucket hat, he had already carved out a name for himself in television. His first big break came when he played Maynard G. Krebs on The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis. Maynard wasn't your typical TV character. He was eccentric, lazy, and wore his beatnik lifestyle like a badge of honor. Yet, despite all his quirks, audiences loved him. And Hollywood noticed. Sherwood Schwartz saw in Denver the exact qualities he needed for his bumbling first mate, a character who could be endearing, frustrating, and hilarious all at once. And when Schwartz cast him as Gilligan, television history was made. Gilligan was never the hero of the island, but he was always its heart. Viewers laughed at his constant slip-ups, the way he always seemed to mess up a rescue attempt or trip over himself at the worst possible time. But they also loved him for his childlike innocence and pure-hearted nature. There was something universal about Gilligan. He was the person everyone could relate to, the one who tried his best, even if he never quite got it right. For Bob Denver, the role would become both his greatest blessing and his heaviest burden. After Gilligan's Island ended in 1966, Denver struggled to escape the shadow of Gilligan. He starred in Dusty's Trail, a Western reimagining of the Gilligan's Island concept, but the show only lasted one season. Audiences didn't want Denver as anyone else. To them, he would always be Gilligan, the lovable goof in a red shirt. He reprised the role multiple times in reunion specials and animated spin-offs, cementing his legacy. In 1992, he even made a playful cameo on Baywatch, still wearing his famous costume, a wink to the audience that Gilligan would never truly go away. But behind the nostalgia and laughter, Denver's relationship with fame was complicated. By the 1970s, he admitted he had grown tired of Hollywood. In interviews, he confessed that he left Los Angeles because he was, in his own words, TV ed out. The constant recognition, the typecasting, and the struggle to land new roles all weighed heavily on him. Eventually, he moved away from the spotlight, choosing a quieter life. Yet, even in semi-retirement, Denver never fully escaped Gilligan. Fans continued to write to him, and he made occasional appearances, always greeted with affection from audiences who never stopped loving the first mate who could never quite get things right. In the end, Bob Denver's story came to a heartbreaking close in September 2005. He had been diagnosed with throat cancer, a battle he fought with determination. Sadly, at just 70 years old, complications took his life. Fans around the world mourned his passing. For millions, it felt as though Gilligan himself had left the island for good. But his legacy endured. Not just as a comedian or actor, but as a character who brought joy, laughter, and a sense of innocence to countless homes. Standing beside Gilligan in nearly every episode was Alan Hale Jr., the lovable and commanding skipper. If Gilligan was the heart of the island, the skipper was its anchor. Large, booming, and full of energy, Alan Hale Jr. fit the role perfectly. Sherwood Schwartz later revealed that Hale was cast just weeks before filming began. He said he wasn't looking for a bear, something intimidating, but a teddy bear, someone warm, protective, and endearing. Hale fit that description to a T. His chemistry with Bob Denver was undeniable. The skipper's exasperated cries of "Gilligan," paired with his affectionate slaps on the head, became a staple of the show. Together, they were one of television's most beloved comedic duos. But Alan Hale Jr. was more than just the skipper. After Gilligan's Island, he remained active in Hollywood, but he also invested his time and passion into something far more personal: a restaurant. He opened Alan Hale's Lobster Barrel in Los Angeles, a place where fans could not only eat, but also meet the skipper himself. Hale often worked there in person, greeting customers with his signature charm, taking photos, and sharing laughs. For him, it wasn't just about running a business. It was about giving back to the people who had supported him for so many years. Still, like many of his castmates, Hale's later years were shadowed by illness. In 1989, he was diagnosed with thymus cancer, a rare form of the disease. Despite the diagnosis, he remained upbeat and continued to spend time with fans and family. But in January 1990, at the age of 68, Alan Hale Jr. passed away. His death marked another painful loss for Gilligan's Island fans. The skipper, who had always been Gilligan's protector, had set sail for his final voyage. Together, Bob Denver and Alan Hale Jr. embodied the heart of Gilligan's Island. Their friendship on screen mirrored a bond that fans felt with them off-screen, one built on laughter, loyalty, and love. To this day, reruns of the show keep their spirits alive, a reminder of the joy they brought to millions. Jim Backus, the man behind the endlessly wealthy and perpetually confused Thurston Howell III, was already a seasoned actor long before Gilligan's Island came into his life. To many in Hollywood, he was known as a character actor, a man with a unique voice and a face that could slide easily into roles both comedic and serious. But when Sherwood Schwartz cast him as the spoiled millionaire stranded on a deserted island, Backus elevated the stereotype into something unforgettable. Howell wasn't just rich, he was hilariously oblivious, constantly fumbling with the reality of survival while still clinging to his high society airs. His delivery, dripping with pretension, often punctuated with his signature chuckle, made him a standout character. Backus had already made his mark in other ways. One of his most famous contributions to American culture came long before Gilligan, when he lent his unmistakable voice to the iconic cartoon character Mr. Magoo. That role alone made him a household name. But Howell gave him something even deeper, a chance to parody the excesses of the wealthy in a way that audiences couldn't resist. The genius of Backus's performance was how he made Howell both ridiculous and strangely lovable. Even though he was selfish, clueless, and completely out of touch, there was an innocence to him that made audiences laugh rather than despise him. What many fans didn't know at the time, however, was that Jim Backus was living with a hidden struggle. In the later years of his career, he developed Parkinson's disease, a condition that slowly robbed him of control over his movements and voice. It was a cruel twist of fate for an actor who had built his career on his expressive talents. Despite the illness, Backus continued working for as long as he could, even reprising his role as Howell in later Gilligan reunion projects. His resilience was remarkable, but behind the camera, the toll was heavy. His wife, Henny, stood by his side through the hardest moments, supporting him as the disease advanced. In 1989, at the age of 76, Jim Backus passed away from complications of pneumonia, a condition made worse by his Parkinson's battle. His death struck fans deeply. To them, Thurston Howell III wasn't just a rich man stranded on an island. He was part of the family they had welcomed into their living rooms, week after week. With Backus's passing, the world lost not just a comedic talent, but also a reminder of the lighter side of life, one that could find humor even in the most absurd situations. Alongside Jim Backus's pompous millionaire was his equally unforgettable on-screen wife, Eunice "Lovey" Howell, played by Natalie Schafer. If Thurston Howell III embodied wealth, Lovey embodied grace, or at least her version of it. Dressed in pearls and gowns, she represented the type of socialite who couldn't imagine life without luxury, yet somehow managed to adjust, however reluctantly, to life on the island. Schafer's performance was one of charm, wit, and understated comedy. She gave Lovey Howell a warmth that balanced her husband's buffoonery. Together, they created a dynamic that became one of the show's most iconic pairings. What's fascinating about Natalie Schafer is that she wasn't just playing a wealthy woman. In many ways, she was one. Born in 1900, Schafer was already in her 60s when Gilligan's Island began. Many viewers at the time didn't realize that she had lived through some of Hollywood's most glamorous eras, appearing in stage productions and films long before. Television made her a household name. Her casting as Mrs. Howell came late in her career, but it was the role that ensured she would never be forgotten. Off-screen, Schaefer was known for her wit and practicality. She reportedly only took the part on Gilligan's Island because she thought the show wouldn't last more than a season, and because she enjoyed the idea of filming in Hawaii for the pilot. What she didn't expect was that the show would become a cultural phenomenon, giving her more fame than she had ever experienced in her decades-long career. Even more surprising was the financial reward. Like the character she played, Schaefer had invested wisely over the years, amassing a fortune that rivaled the fictional wealth of the Howells. By the time of her death, she had left behind millions of dollars, much of it donated to medical research, including cancer treatment programs. Schaefer never married again after her divorce from actor Lewis Calhern, and she lived much of her later life privately, enjoying the comfort of her success. But she remained gracious toward her fans and appreciative of the role that gave her so much recognition. In April 1991, at the age of 90, Natalie Schaefer passed away from cancer. True to her character's enduring elegance, she faced her illness with dignity. Together, Jim Backus and Natalie Schaefer embodied the heart of satire on Gilligan's Island. They were the couple who showed that wealth and class could be both absurd and endearing, depending on how you looked at it. For fans, they were more than just caricatures of the rich. They were a reminder that even those at the top of society's ladder could be vulnerable, funny, and deeply human when stripped of their comforts. Their legacy endures not only through reruns but also in the laughter they continue to inspire. Among the castaways, there was one who seemed to have an answer for everything. The ingenious professor, played by Russell Johnson. His character became the go-to problem solver on the island, able to fashion radios, generators, and even washing machines out of coconuts and bamboo. Yet, as fans often joked, despite his brilliance, he could never quite fix a hole in a boat. That paradox became one of the show's longest-running gags and a source of affectionate ribbing for years. But Johnson's professor was more than just a walking punchline. He represented the cleverness and resourcefulness that audiences admired. He was calm, intelligent, and rational, the steady counterbalance to Gilligan's clumsiness and Howell's absurdity. Russell Johnson's path to Gilligan's Island was as interesting as the show itself. Before becoming an actor, he had served as a bombardier in World War II. His plane was shot down in the Philippines, and he spent time recovering from serious injuries after bailing out. That wartime experience shaped him deeply, instilling both resilience and a quiet dignity that he carried into his later career. After the war, he studied acting under the GI Bill, slowly working his way into film and television. Prior to Gilligan's Island, Johnson had appeared in numerous science fiction movies of the 1950s, often cast as scientists or military men. It was almost as if his Hollywood career had been preparing him for the role of the professor all along. Off-screen, Johnson was known for his humility and warmth. Unlike some of his co-stars, he didn't bristle at being typecast. While he sometimes joked about how fans couldn't see him as anything but the professor, he accepted the role with grace, grateful for the recognition it gave him. He often appeared at fan conventions, happily meeting admirers who wanted nothing more than to thank him for being part of their childhoods. Later in life, he also became an advocate for AIDS awareness after losing his son to complications from the disease. His willingness to speak out publicly at a time when few did showed another side to him, a man who could use his fame for something meaningful. Russell Johnson lived a long life, passing away in 2014 at the age of 89 from kidney failure. By then, he had already watched most of his castmates depart before him. His death left only Tina Louise and Dawn Wells as the final survivors of the island cast. Fans mourned his passing deeply, not just because he was the professor, but because he had embodied so many of the qualities they cherished: intelligence, kindness, and quiet strength. If Russell Johnson brought steadiness to the island, Dawn Wells brought heart. Cast as Mary Ann Summers, the sweet farm girl from Kansas, Wells gave the show one of its most beloved characters. Mary Ann wasn't flashy or dramatic. She wasn't a movie star like Ginger or a high-society dame like Mrs. Howell. She was relatable. She represented the wholesome girl next door, caring, friendly, and full of optimism even in the most absurd circumstances. For many viewers, especially young men of the 1960s, Mary Ann was the true dream girl of the island. In fact, the long-running debate of Ginger or Mary Ann became a cultural talking point that has never really disappeared. Dawn Wells wasn't just playing Mary Ann. In many ways, she embodied her. Born in Nevada in 1938, she grew up with a grounded, small-town upbringing before making her way into pageants and eventually acting. Her charm and warmth made her a natural fit for television, but it was Gilligan's Island that cemented her status as a pop culture icon. After the show ended, Wells embraced her fame, touring the country, attending conventions, and always engaging with fans. She was known to answer fan mail personally, often adding little touches of kindness that made people feel like they truly knew her. Unlike some of her co-stars, Wells never resented being typecast as Mary Ann. She understood the impact the character had on fans and carried it proudly. She even wrote a book later in life titled What Would Mary Ann Do?, reflecting on the lessons the character could still teach about kindness, resilience, and optimism. Off-screen, she also dedicated time to charitable work, particularly focusing on helping people in need and supporting education. But Wells's later years weren't easy. Despite her fame, she struggled financially, a harsh reminder of how fleeting television success can be. In 2018, news broke that she was facing significant debt and medical expenses, prompting friends and fans to rally together to raise funds for her care. The outpouring of support was a testament to how deeply she was loved. Sadly, in December 2020, Dawn Wells passed away at the age of 82 due to complications from COVID-19. Her death was especially heartbreaking, not only because it came during such a turbulent time in the world, but also because it marked the end of an era. With her passing, Tina Louise became the sole surviving cast member of Gilligan's Island. Russell Johnson and Dawn Wells represented two very different archetypes on the show, the brain and the heart. But together, they captured what made Gilligan's Island endure. The professor's brilliance and Mary Ann's warmth reminded viewers that survival wasn't just about clever inventions or makeshift huts. It was also about compassion, hope, and the ability to face life's absurdities with a smile. Their contributions made the island feel real, and their legacies continued to resonate with every rerun. No matter how clever the professor was, or how commanding the skipper tried to be, Gilligan's Island would have been nothing without the clumsy, big-hearted character at its center, Gilligan himself. Played by Bob Denver, Gilligan was the soul of the series. Goofy, accident-prone, and often the reason the castaways' rescue plans failed. And yet, audiences never resented him. Instead, they loved him, because Denver gave Gilligan something far more important than comic mishaps: innocence. Gilligan was the kind of person who could mess everything up but still win your heart in the process. He was well-meaning, endlessly loyal to his friends, and at his core, simply wanted everyone to be happy. For Bob Denver, stepping into Gilligan's shoes was both a blessing and a burden. He had already achieved television fame as Maynard G. Krebs, the beatnik sidekick on The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis. That role had made him a household name, especially among younger audiences. But Gilligan's Island was on a whole different level. Suddenly, he was no longer just a quirky sidekick. He was the lead in a show that relied on his ability to carry both comedy and heart. Denver delivered in spades. His physical comedy, the pratfalls, the wide-eyed expressions, the clumsy tumbles, became iconic, but so too did his softer moments. Gilligan wasn't just funny, he was lovable. Off-camera, Bob Denver was far from the bumbling fool he portrayed. He was a thoughtful, private man who valued his family above everything else. Friends described him as gentle and down-to-earth, someone who avoided the Hollywood spotlight whenever possible. He didn't chase fame or fortune. In fact, he often seemed almost uncomfortable with the level of recognition the show brought him. Later in life, he settled in West Virginia with his wife and children, preferring the quiet life over the chaos of Hollywood. He even hosted a radio show for many years, where his warm voice and wit reminded fans why they adored him in the first place. Still, Denver struggled with the typecasting that came from playing Gilligan. Casting directors rarely saw him as anything else, and though he reprised the role in various spin-offs and reunion specials, it limited the opportunities available to him. Yet, rather than grow bitter, Denver leaned into his legacy. He embraced the fact that millions of people had grown up with Gilligan and loved him for it. In interviews, he often expressed gratitude for the character, understanding that not many actors ever get the chance to leave behind something so enduring. Denver's later years were marked by health challenges. In 2005, he was diagnosed with throat cancer, and despite treatments, he passed away that same year at the age of 70. His death saddened fans worldwide who felt they had lost not just an actor, but a symbol of innocence and laughter. Even today, Gilligan's red shirt and floppy hat remain one of television's most recognizable images, a tribute to Bob Denver's timeless performance. If Bob Denver's Gilligan was the heart of the show, Alan Hale Jr.'s Skipper was its anchor. Big, boisterous, and full of bluster, Jonas Grumby, better known as the Skipper, was the captain of the ill-fated SS Minnow. His booming voice and constant exasperation with Gilligan became one of the show's signature dynamics. How many times did viewers watch him raise his hand as if to smack Gilligan on the head, only to stop just short, a mixture of frustration and affection on his face? Together, Bob Denver and Alan Hale Jr. embodied the heart of Gilligan's Island. They weren't just characters on a screen. They were friends, father and son figures, and symbols of a simpler time when television could make audiences laugh, cry, and dream of tropical adventures. Their passing left a void, but their performances continue to bring joy to anyone who tunes in and finds themselves stranded, once again, on that unforgettable island.